Y2K, a term that brings fear to many people's minds.
What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Oh, my eyes! My eyes! Ah!
From the computer collapse conspiracy theory or the questionable fashion trends.
Do you or do you not feel bonita?
I feel bonita.
Either way, there's a lot of horror amongst the name itself. There's also a lot of horror that was released during this time that was different from all the other decades before. It was a time that was just getting deeper SFX and CGI capabilities, and what better genre to slop it on and try it out than horror? I mean, no one takes that genre seriously. Choice that ended up creating a lot of horrible horror films, as does every decade, let's be fair.
Existence begins and ends today.
You're an animal!
But also gave rise to some new fantastic horror films as well. Many people brush this time off as a stumbling, chaotic phase of vapid, indistinguishable, pointless horror slop, but I have to tell you, there's some gems amongst the slop, which is what I'm going to present you with today. Y2K horror that doesn't suck. I will not be getting into the 2010s horror as I feel that it deserves a video of its own due to its evolution from the early 2000s horror content.
Finally, can the Emoji Movie please have its own category?
So with that, let's get into this video. Cabin Fever 2002, directed by Eli Roth. Eli Roth's directorial debut comedy horror film is actually a good movie in my opinion, despite its obvious infective virus cliches it presents on the surface. While this film leans into the campy and gore, I still think the story is quite an interesting concept considering that it was inspired by Roth's own experience with a skin infection he obtained from a trip in Iceland where he worked on a farm. So, what better way to make the most of your traumatizing skin experience than adapting it into a horror movie that hyperbolizes that event and turns it into your actual worst nightmare.
No fucking way, not me!
Cabin fever cleverly uses the term associated with restlessness and irritability typically associated with long periods of isolation indoors, usually during the winter, and gives it more literal, skin-crawling reference as college friends taking a fall break in cabin isolated in the woods. Did no one warn them about isolated cabins in the woods? Did they really not see The Evil Dead? Or at least watch my video on The Evil Dead? And speaking of my channel, if you've enjoyed this video so far and you are ready to dive into actual Y2K horror goodness, make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what is your favorite Y2K horror movie and why. Comments that say Y2K horror movies that's good, that doesn't exist, do not count. Anyway, back to the video. Anyway, basically a flesh-eating virus manifests and makes its way into almost every student within the cabin and everything falls apart, literally. This group is slowly devoured by it and is torn apart in the worst way. Eli Roth actually tried to get this made much sooner than 2002. In fact, he wrote the script in 1995, but studios weren't interested in his ideas at the time as horror in the 1990s was not doing too well. Until Scream in 1996, production studios realized that horror could have a plot and capture audience attention outside of just a killer with a hook or chainsaw, or whatever weapon of choice. However, studios were still not wanting to touch Cabin Fever because it didn't really mimic the recently successful Scream. Finally though, it got made, and actually, David Lynch was apparently an executive producer on this film, but strangely there's no credit to him in the actual credits of the movie. Filming started in 2001 near Mount Airy, North Carolina, but was delayed several times due to unions and anthrax. Yeah, it sounds like they were having a horrific experience before filming even began. But apart from some really weird and creepy demands from Roth for Serena Vincent to show her naked booty, it seemed to all come together in the end, unlike most of the skin in this film. Now let's talk about the music. Composer Angelo Badalamenti of David Lynch Association, who did Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me, Mulholland Drive, etc., composed some of the musical themes because he actually enjoyed the concept of the film, but ultimately it was Nathan Barr who ended up composing the majority of it. This movie premiered at Midnight Madness section of the Toronto International Film Festival in 2002 and did so well that Lionsgate purchased distribution rights for the film. It also did very well at the box office, becoming the third highest grossing film released by Lionsgate in 2003. And while reviews from critics were mixed, most were positive, and I'd have to agree with those. There was a sequel in 2009, but honestly, I'd say skip it. It's not really that good in my opinion. And it focuses on horror settings I absolutely hate. Prom. Carrie is an exception, but Prom Night, both versions are not. Unfortunately, tried to capture the original, but I think failed due to possible production pressure for the story to fit with what they were selling at the time. A lot of overly sexual prom-ready high school students getting into some really hot water and not in the way you think. And I'm not going to talk about the others, Cabin Fever Patient Zero and the 2016 remake, because one, it belongs in the 2010s category, and two, I haven't watched these. But from what I've seen, we're not really missing out on anything. Look, the original Cabin Fever is a goofy, campy, low-budgety feeling Y2K horror, but it's kind of great. The cabin and the feel obviously give Evil Dead vibes and other classes like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Deliverance, which Roth is a fan of, so he succeeded in getting his inspirations across very clearly. Yes, it's sort of overdone now, but for early 2000s horror, it's really good material. Not only do you get the gore, you get the comedy too. Two of my favorite combinations. And if that's your combination too, this one's for you. Although it might get under your skin a little. The House of the Devil, Ty West, 2009. Do you love late night pizza parties, long walks in the darkness of a lunar eclipse, and satanic cults? Well, if so, boy, do I have a movie for you. This film includes all three, although the pizza party is a bit more adult. Now, this film was one I did watch during my shut-in neat era in high school when it was still popping on Netflix.
Go outside, nerd.
I didn't really look at the title or synopsis or really anything. Just clicked play because I was determined to consume as much horror as I could during that time. Why? It was a rough era. I legitimately thought this was an older movie because of the styling, aesthetics, and costuming is so good for capturing the period of the time this is set in, the 1980s. West achieved this authentic look due to his use of 16mm cameras, which was a very nice touch, and was filmed in Connecticut, where you can get a lot of old vintage-looking houses without having to add too much to it. The cinematography also utilized camera techniques like the camera zoom instead of the dolly that was standard in the 70s and 80s, as well as presenting the credits in the opening freeze frames and at the end over a still image of the final scene. Finally, the opening that reads based on true events is also a classic vintage horror detail. Amityville, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, name the rest in the comments below. It really sold me that it was a vintage film, so you can imagine my shock when I discovered it was a 2009 film.
How do you like them apples?
And this era was also my era of hating on modern horror. So anyway, the time period fits perfectly, not just for the plot itself, but also for the time it's referencing, as well as a known cultural conspiracy was occurring in the 1980s, aka the Satanic Panic era in the USA. Additionally, this film gives major vintage horror vibes with the babysitter trope trying to survive a horrific ordeal that she's been subjected to. It's giving Halloween, it's giving When a Stranger Calls, Bloody Birthday, it's even giving, to some extent, Rosemary's Baby. The plot on the surface seemed overdone, but it's so good in the way that West presents it. A classic setup of strapped-for-cash college student who lands a babysitting gig, finds herself trapped in the middle of a satanic cult ritual that goes already is obvious, but it somehow seems new as well. Think of watching this in 2009. You wouldn't have at first thought it was a 2009 movie. You'd be like, is this a vintage horror movie that I actually like that I've never heard of? No, it's not. But it's acted, shot, and executed very awesomely. It's entertaining, it's intriguing, it's starring our favorite girl, Greta Gerwig. It's wonderful to look at, something Ty West does a fantastic job with all of his films. And fun fact with this film, while filming, the crew stayed at the Yankee Peddler Inn, which claimed to house supernatural residents and other strange phenomena. This actually inspired the next film he would make, The Innkeepers, in 2011. Another one of his films that I think is pretty good as well. This premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival on April 25th, 2009 and was released on video on demand in October of the same year, receiving a limited theatrical release in the US on October 30th. Critical reception was really good and it deserves it. All my fellow vintage horror lovers will be satisfied by this recognizable tribute to classic horror cinema, and if you like satanic cult horror as much as I do, this one's for you. Just don't take any dodgy babysitting gigs for quick cash, okay? Donate plasma instead. It's way safer. Session 9, 2001, Brad Anderson. This film should be considered for a walking ad for asbestos lawsuits. Seriously, a cleanup crew that goes insane while dealing with toxic materials of a bygone era is perfect for selling those lawyers' suits.
Mesothelioma is a rare cancer. Asbestos in the Navy, shipyards, mills, heating, construction, or the automotive industries may have put you at risk.
Directed by Brad Anderson, Session 9 follows an asbestos abatement crew taking on a time crunch cleanup at an abandoned mental asylum. And well, things go as you might expect based on any horror film set in an abandoned asylum, or any asylum really.
He's escaping! Killer is escaping!
It stars some heavy hitter actors as well, including a very familiar crime scene investigator, David Caruso.
I guess today isn't this Groundhog's Day.
Yeah!
What are you doing? CSI Miami. Caruso?
Additionally, it stars Peter Mullen,
Stephen Jevett,
There's some really good talent in this film, which makes it come across as more serious and interesting than a goofy psychological ghost story. It's more cerebral than anything. So I'll warn you, this one's a thinker. You're gonna be thinking about what you just watched for months, pondering the meaning, which sometimes I enjoy. It stands out amongst the Y2K teen slasher genre reboot that was going on due to Scream. I love this film because it approaches horror in a more comprehensive way. Instead of focusing on a main character, although clearly there is one, it expands each character's relationship with a deteriorating building and their deteriorating psyches. This was director Brad Anderson's first horror film. He was in the rom-com genre before this, believe it or not, but what's interesting is that his inspiration was Richard Rosenthal, a Boston case that took place where he grew up in the 1990s, where the man's wife, after she ruined his dinner and then brutally and outside of their house. He was also inspired by the obvious too, the Danvers State Asylum. The asylum notorious for its shock treatment and unethical treatments of mentally ill patients. And finally, Don't Look Now in 1973 was also an inspiration as well. Also a really great film if you haven't seen it. And with the backdrop of the actual location shooting within Danvers Asylum, Session 9 manifested as a creepy, deranged, and dark horror film. And for the film nerds, it was one of the first films to be shot in 24p HD digital video instead of the standard of the time, regular digital with 30 FPS. It is a slow burn, but it is worth it. And I really thought this was a TV movie. Just kind of had that low budget feel, which is a compliment coming from me. But apparently it was a theatrical release after premiering at the Fantasia Festival in July 2001. Reviews were generally positive, though there are split feelings on the ending, which I won't spoil for you. Overall, Session 9 combines psychological, supernatural, and haunted house or asylum horror, and it works so well. If you want a horror film that'll drive you to the loony bin trying to figure out what it means, this one's for you.
We're gonna hang out and watch a movie.
Splinter 2008, Toby Wilkins. Filmed in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, this horror film is what you want in a sinister, infectious zombie virus that takes over your brain. It all starts so innocently as a couple taking a romantic camping trip. Alright, that was your first mistake. Geez, just like the cabin fever people.
I wish we'd never gone camping.
Anyway, they get carjacked by another couple with a little more ruggedness to them, and they find themselves stranded at a gas station. And that's when things really start to go wrong. See, what I love about this particular parasitic infectious disease is its actual basis in fungi. Yep, the same ones from The Last of Us. The fungi that are capable of taking over a host body, also known as the cordyceps zombie ant fungi. A fungus that infects and takes over carpenter ants' minds by altering their behaviors and essentially controlling them. It's really crazy.
Infected brain directs this ant upwards. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony.
Which I really feel like for the time was underappreciated and overlooked. And actually, that's what aspect Wilkins said he found more horrific.
Obviously, as a horror element, the idea of being infected by something that you can fight against but you know is going to win. And then even when it does kill you, it turns into basically a dead body that is running around trying to kill other people.
It gives definite 28 Days Later and The Thing vibes with the concept, but it makes it interesting in the way that it visually manifests as a spiky, weird thing that seeks to transform and take over the host, whether together or not. That's another detail I really love as well. A thing aspect. See, the fungi can take over whatever it wants, body or limb, attached or not. It's also temperature sensitive, so the hotter you run, the more appealing you are. And the Splinter definitely likes it hot. And the idea of a small fungi being so violently powerful and trapping them in a small abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere, despite there being so much space and a chance for escape, is so much more terrifying. Like the fungi is closing in on you. And yet, if you could just get out of the gas station, you have at least a chance of escaping by the highway. But this is Oklahoma too. So this was a fairly low budget film, but I feel like it makes the most of it. Actually, most of the effects are practical in this movie, which I appreciate, with choreographed movements done by gymnasts, mimes, and stunt person. Oh my. This film had a limited theatrical release on October 31st, 2008. Wait a minute, Halloween of 2008. Halloween 2008, what was I doing? Probably trunk or treating. Anyway, not watching this film, which would have been way better than any church-approved candy. Honestly, it's such an underrated film because I think it got lost amongst the Y2K horror slop, and the limited theatrical release certainly didn't help because I feel like if it was tweaked a little and released now, it would do really well. I guess people weren't ready for the fungi zombie parasite in 2008. But anyway, this film is really entertaining and actually looks really good on the effects side too. I rewatched this a few months ago and they really do hold up today. A rarity of a lot of Y2K horror films. So yeah, if you want a fungi movie with not so fun guys, this one's for you. It's all fun and games until some fungi takes over your eye. The Descent, Neil Marshall. You thought cave exploration was deadly enough on its own, from the claustrophobic cracks and the crevices you have to squeeze through and the total darkness around you, but oh no.
It's worse.
Blind, creepy crawler creatures who thrive in total darkness and can sense your movement with perfect smell, hearing, and climbing capability. Their only flaw is the loss of eyesight, but you don't really need sight in total darkness. Set in North America, this horror film focuses on 6 adrenaline junkie friends who reunite a year later in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina after a tragic accident takes the lives of one of the friends' husband and child. So after voluntarily deciding to go spelunking, why would you ever voluntarily elect to do that? I don't know.
You're a nut.
They end up finding themselves lost within the labyrinth of the cave. It's the worst kind of situation. You can't see anything, you're being tracked by murderous creatures, and there's no signal, so you can't even use maps to get out of there. As the group wanders and eventually splits off, there's more than just friendships threatened and lost in the race to find out of the cave maze. So this film was shot in the UK despite it being set in North America. And spoiler, it wasn't filmed in an actual cave, which was actually really good and really smart for safety, honestly. Simon Bowles designed the cave and utilized 21 different cave sets. This is pretty impressive because it does look as though they are actually really in a cave. There are actually 2 cuts to this film because apparently American audiences didn't like the no hope ending. Now let's talk more about the actual creatures themselves because they had extensive planning and design. These crawlers are meant to be somewhat human, but definitely not like how we are as light evolved humans. They were designed by Paul Hyatt, a makeup prosthetics artist, and actually weren't revealed to the actresses until the actual scenes with them in order to obtain a more realistic reaction. So basically, they're terrifying. Not something you want to think about when you're caving. Again, why would you want to go caving? It was very positively received by critics and audiences alike. It premiered at the Dead by Dawn Festival in Edinburgh on July 6, 2005, and then was commercially released on July 10th. So you might know Marshall from his previous film, Dog Soldiers, which some of you commented on in my werewolf video. However, I really have no interest in watching it. I'm just gonna be honest, not getting reviewed on this channel. Sorry, not interested. Y'all are gonna really hate that. But I do love this movie of his. It does have a 2009 sequel that kind of closes the story, but honestly, it's not as good as the first film. It's a real on the edge of your seat or ledge kind of horror. It's built slowly and creepily, making the darkness really feel like it's setting in even with all the lights on. This isn't just a horrific monster hunt of humans, there's actually a really interesting story behind the horror itself, which sets it apart from other Y2K horror as a more dynamic and complicated plot. The acting is awesome and believable, and you will be feeling as claustrophobic and vulnerable as the friends are in this film. So if you're looking for a horror film that truly descends into chaos, cruel fate, and tragic ending, this one's for you. So you see, Y2K isn't that scary. Well, it has its moments.
Hey.
But really, the Y2K horror isn't as bad as an era as some make it out to be. There's a ton of slop from it, but every decade has that. It's just easier to remember all the bad films than the good ones. While Scream made horror films more marketable to producers in the late 90s and onwards to produce mindless, pointless horror, it also gave an opportunity for talented filmmakers and writers to emerge and create some inventive, entertaining, chilling films that are just as memorable as any decade before or after. So, before you diss the Y2K, embrace it. Try these out. Just maybe avoid isolated cabins in the woods, sketchy babysitting gigs, asbestos cleanings that will eventually lead to a lawsuit, and caves in general. Oh, and tip here, you can actually use a credit card to get that Splinter out, because that's really the only good thing credit cards are for anymore, am I right? All the crypto bros in the comments below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, stay safe and spooky, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!